Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill them! Kill them both! No, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
Brother Joshua, how are you doing? I know how you're doing because we just spent like 2 hours speaking pre-recording, but it's great because we have a lot to talk about. So it's not it's always generative, and I think it actually will lead into a really interesting episode. And I'll let you introduce you, who is not my idol, but definitely I look up to you as a fellow brother of podcasting. Not just because we are co-hosts on a other popular show, but because just because of your history. And I do think of you as a legendary podcaster, and I really appreciate that I got to know you through podcasting and that we continued working together. So thank you, and please introduce yourself, Joshua.
Well, hello again, Jen. It's a pleasure to be here as always. And yeah, podcasting has kind of become a hobby of mine. I never really got into it until, more recently in my life, just because I never really had good enough internet. And so for me, it's been a lot of fun just to kind of meet people and have conversations. And, when I was younger, I used to travel, and I've been to Europe a few times. And so I would always cherish those conversations with people in remote places from where I live in a very small town type atmosphere. So podcasting for me is a lot like traveling to other cultures and places and being able to kind of taste the culture, so to speak, right? So the internet's kind of an interesting place to be able to do that and still be in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, geographically. So yeah, I really enjoy it. And like you said, we were talking earlier, and so I feel like, yeah, we're kind of in the flow now, and it's, I'm here as the branch today. I guess StreamYard already had me in there as that. So
sorry, Josh, I'll use the branch. I'll use the branch. It might be a little
whichever.
weird.
It doesn't matter.
I know
it's
you're
just
cool.
that I know people probably get confused because I'm always got like different names, but it's just, like you said, I've done so many different podcasts for so long. I got like different names I do for different things. Like the branch is usually what I use for Bible study or that. And then MPC 3.14 is mostly for like news. And then William Birkin was something I made more specifically to talk about like umbrella organizations, corporations, the COVID pandemic type stuff, so it's always been kind of unintentional, but I understand it could be hard to follow. So thank you for bearing with me. Anyway, it's good to be here. And today we'll be talking about Claymore.
Oh, yes, we are discussing Claymore. I know I did that to the title, and I totally forgot which episode we were doing because we are doing a long form series. As you know, that's my favorite. I want to do that. So especially because we work well together, and we basically speak at like quite often. I'd say you're like a fixture in my life, Joshua. To be honest, whether you feel like that or not, I feel like that. So
I'm a comfortable chair.
Absolutely. But I know I'm going to get scolded in some way, but in a constructive and like positivistic way. So that's what honestly one of your superpowers. Like among all the hosts, I can absolutely point that out and say, if I need dad advice, I might go to someone else, but I know I'm gonna get it. I know what I'm gonna get if I if I ask Joshua. It's gonna be pragmatic, like you need to do this. But you don't say it like that. You say it in a nicer way. But yeah, so we are discussing Claymore. So I'm gonna let you give your notes, but first, why don't we do a little bit of how did you first get introduced to Claymore, Joshua? And then I'll tell my Claymore story, and then we can I'll let you do your notes. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, Joshua, how did you get involved with Claymore, or how did you find Claymore?
Well, it might be more correct to say that Claymore found me, because I think really it was kind of organic through the algorithm, maybe on Netflix or something like that a long time back. This was years ago too. Um, I remember maybe even when Netflix was still doing the discs. It might even have been that long ago. I know that they started a new feature where you could stream, and I noticed they had anime. So this was the time when I've never really watched a lot of anime, but this was the period of time in my life. I think I just happened to be unemployed or something, so I did have some extra time at the time, and so I watched several different anime series, Netflix, and this was just one of them that I happened to run across. So, and I tend to binge watch things sometimes whenever I enjoy it, just because I tend to be so busy sometimes. This is also around the time I started getting into nonprofit work, because I didn't like the idea of just collecting unemployment and not working or whatever, starting to make myself busy. But so this was like a interesting time in my life, because I haven't had experiences like that too often, and so it was not able to actually consume it all in one go. But then I found that while preparing for the episode, I actually forgot a lot about it, and so I had to go on YouTube and kind of refresh myself. And I was kind of surprised at how much I missed the first time around. And so when I these notes, I felt like it was a synergy of what I know now versus what I knew maybe. I mean, this is maybe 10 years ago. I saw more, as a mind you, from what I understand, I've learned that the anime, quote unquote, or OVA or whatever they're called, is actually a little different than the manga. And I guess the manga kind of persists for a while longer and maybe doesn't have such a dramatic arc, because, the arc was made more dramatic, I guess, so that it had more of like an impactful ending, I guess. But of course, that's done oftentimes with these types of OVA situations, I guess, right? So they're just kind of like taking a slice out of it. But yeah, that was like my first experience with it. So I'm kind of tempted that there's like a Crunchyroll promo on Amazon now. That's the only way I can rewatch it right now, is to do some type of silly thing like that. So, but I've been trying to find some way to enjoy it again. But I remember really liking it for several different reasons. But like I said, I'll expand on some of those as we kind of expand on the topic. But go ahead. Thank you for allowing me to talk about it.
Of course. It's your episode, Joshua. Uh, so for me, Claymore was I've always been into anime. Obviously, I've done other anime episodes on the show with Monty, with Eric, with Zach, with you. We did a little. I mean, no, we will. We'll have another episode actually before this airs. We'll have another one drop on the Umbrella Corps. So we did kind of do an expanded canon on that. So I've done a lot of anime episodes, and so it's no secret that for anyone who listens, for those who follow the show, it's no secret that I love anime, and I find it a very interesting both uh, uh, pop culture and like mediatic culture, but also I like the metaphysics of it. I think it contains a really interesting hermeneutic and can be understood also through hermeneutics, particularly Kabbalah, etc. So Claymore was part of something it was part of something I watched and read before I really got good at Kabbalah or good at Tantra or good at magic. Like, yeah, was involved with all those things, but I wasn't necessarily the same level. So I knew that there was an interesting metaphysics there. Like I'm not being humble. I'm saying that I could see that there was, but I didn't at that time I was not at the level of understanding, which is okay. But I was really interested in this idea of like I watched a lot of action anime. Like action, anything with action doesn't have to be shonen. I don't even like shonen that much. There was a time in my life I never watched shonen, would never even pay attention to what was like newly released. I would just watch like whatever series I found and what I thought was interesting. And Claymore must have, I think it was probably from manga. I was probably buying manga at the store and seeing Claymore, and then I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll download this," because I probably like thought it would look sick or whatever. So I love it, and I think it's a really interesting series because I've watched it several times, like all the way through, and I think I felt differently about it different times I watched it, but I've always really enjoyed it. So I guess that's what I'll say to like preface is that I've always really enjoyed it. It was something I watched when it first came out. I've read a bit of the manga, not tons of it, but like probably like 50, maybe 40, 50%. Okay. So I'll give like a lower ball number just in case. And so I think it's so cool. It's so stylistic. It does kind of play into another theme that I've talked about with Monty and with Zach is like Koreanification of anime. Because if you watch the series, you'll see it actually is largely Korean production and the credits. So it also offers like a very stylistic difference than maybe some of the contemporary animes of its time. So this was when I first started to notice how much the Koreanification was happening. So let me just say that too, just as an interesting kind of media market literacy kind of framework.
That's a unique distinction I was not aware of. So yeah, I appreciate sharing that. So as far as like the story is concerned, are there any other animes that kind of come to mind when you think of Claymore? Like, because you have a little more experience with anime in general and mangas than I do. Does it, not just so much with the Korean thing, but like in any other way, does it remind you of others?
So I really love isekai. So I probably this is not an isekai series. This is a very violent, let me just say, this is a very violent adult like gore heavy. There's like obviously a gore fetish element. It's not super explicit, but it's there. And it's not elfin lead level, but that's probably a good series to maybe compare it to in a way because Elfin Lead is a lot more ecchi, a lot more fan service. This is not ecchi and this is not fan service. What is in it is transgressive and violence. That's what the ecchi and the fan service is. It's not like cutesy sexuality or panties. So maybe another series you could compare it to. I'm sorry, Joshua. I don't know why I brought up Elfin Lead.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's super
like,
violent. It's super violent,
yeah.
right? Like the Elfin Lead, it's like girls getting their limbs chopped off like all the time or their heads chopped off or people in general. So, and they look like little dolls, right? So that's something that is similar between the two series. And they have powers.
And a way to kind of make another parallel there is like at some point, these claymores, are they all called claymores, by the way, even though they don't all use claymores? What are they?
I don't think they are. I think it's just
them,
the name of the program.
They call them
I think it's just Claire. Excuse me. Sorry.
They call them silver-eyed witches, I think is what they call them.
That's like the popular. So there's like a popular term, and then they call them each other something else. But what people call them are like the silver-eyed witches of whatever the organization.
You're totally right. And so I kind of find like the Elven Lion stuff being similar to maybe when one of these silver-eyed witches hits their limit, they sometimes turn feral, or if they don't eat or something, sometimes they, because maybe we can get into this kind of in the beginning part of like how does one even create a silver-eyed witch, as it were. And it kind of reminds me of things like in The Witcher, for instance, where there's a process to create a witcher, and it might involve like the ingestion of certain chemical, or not chemicals, but plants, and maybe even transgressive materials that would otherwise be forbidden, right? To create this end product, which has resistance to some of these things. Maybe even the abilities, like you said, are kind of part of this unique alchemical result that comes forth.
Oh, sorry, Josh. I apologize.
No, I was finished. Go ahead.
Well, it's still not nice. Come on, we're brothers. We have
Well,
to,
I could tell
I
you
have to
moving
work a little
around.
harder.
I was just talking until you were comfortable.
Okay, so I was looking for a pen because I obviously like to take notes when we work. Always I do this, but sometimes I'm not as good about actually writing down what's in my mind, but I digress. So I agree with you. There's the whole theme, and you and I spoke about this like pre-recording quite a bit, is that the idea of the medicine and the poison being the same thing, or at least it's but dose dependent. I think that's kind of a good thematic framework for the series as a whole, and also I think the comparison to The Witcher is really interesting because we do find out, spoiler alert, later on. I'm not trying to ruin it, Joshua. Tell me if I am, but yeah, we find out that the silver-eyed witches are made with demon essences. It's like there's a interrelationship between the two things, right?
Well, and in fact, it kind of gets into the incestuous relationship with the organization, quote unquote, and how they are making both the silver-eyed witches and the like these ascended creatures and these Yoma, which are like demons. So this organization's kind of behind the scenes, kind of justifying their own existence, and by creating the bad guy and then also creating the problem action reaction solution. It's like very Illuminati-esque, New World Order-ish when you really think about it. Maybe you can kind of talk about that for a minute.
Well, let's define what the general landscape of the worlds is, just briefly, just in case there are like anime or Claymore noobs in the audience.
Yeah.
Basically, it's set in like a sort of pseudo medieval, but the level of technology seems to differ very much, depends on where they are, like what country they're in, what area they're in, the cities they're in. It seems to have a deep variation in kind of like even the awareness of the general population. But there are things called demons, which they are demons. They're not humans. They really have no human inclination. They're like almost completely, they're not mindless because they're deviant, and they're very cunning. So there are kind of like free run demons in a way. They've kind of learned to adapt to a degree to human society while they pick it off as well. So there's like a very predatory element to them, but they're not good. Like they have, it's not even about good and evil really. You can even actually transcend maybe that binary. You can just say they're an animal predator who's always going to target humanity, and they have no emotions. So, and then the claymores are kind of like this too, or the silver-eyed witches, is that they are not well understood. The peasant, like the people in the countries are generally peasants, or even if they're knights, they're scared of them because obviously they don't look the same. And also they are women and they are considered to be like monsters in their own right. But the reality is like demons are a big problem. So that's part of why the organization created these people, these women, so they could defeat the monsters that were really threatening like an existential crisis of humanity. Now, it is set in a more European, I mean, it's very Germanic, and if you want to think of it, landscape. However, there is an idea in anime studies. I know people are gonna like roll their eyes, but it's a real thing. So there's an idea in anime studies that all anime actually takes place on the primordial ground, if you want to call it that. That is Japan. So even though the characters are blonde, silver-eyed, it's set in Germany. They have kind of Germany, Dutchy remix names. There's an idea that maybe they do also exist on Japan, so or they are Japanese. Excuse me, what I should say. So there's something interesting there. I'm not saying I agree with that or not. I'm positing, just looking at it like at a broader landscape. So it does fit into other series like Berserk. It fits into other series like I can't even think. Oh, Shingeki no Kyojin, D Gray Man, obviously Bleach, which both of which I did with Monty. So there is a kind of continuity, and then obviously Free Run. So you could say it exists in the larger metaverse of like these other kind of like more grown up, not shonen, maybe uber violent series that would have been actually more relatable to someone like me who is older. I know you're slightly older than me, Joshua, but I'm just going to speak for myself. So there, so for someone who is slightly older who watched anime from like as a young child, like can remember anime maybe as their like earlier memories. So for us, the anime was very violent, like very violent. Like, yeah, there was cutesy and there was like Ranma and Tenchi and all that stuff too. But and there it was a choice, but like the really cool stuff, the stuff that would have been like similar to Claymore, like Violence Jack, that was extremely violent, extremely transgressive. So even Trigun is quite transgressive and quite violent. And there's like lots of series like that, not just those. But it kind of has something, it's not retro, but it's speaking to sort of a silver age in anime, like that late 90s, maybe, or even earlier mid 90s period. Sorry, I just wanted to say that. So that's kind of the landscape, both the plot and maybe the cultural context around it.
Yeah, and in that way, it kind of reminds me of Vampire Hunter D, because he was kind of doing
Great
the same
analogy.
thing. Yeah, traveling around, dispatching these monsters or whatever, but he himself was, part vampire or something like that.
So that's a great analogy. That's a great series analogy, probably better than any of them I gave, because that is what she is a demon hunter for hire. She does get paid. It's very important. It's considered to be like if you don't pay them, there are consequences. And sometimes that means they kill you. Or they let the demons kill you, or there's a bunch of things. It's like it's implied like the church takes it very seriously. Like you pay the demon hunters.
Well, and that
So
kind of lends itself to the cold nature of the witches, right? Because they take into themselves that Yoma indifference. In a sense, they're kind of cohabitating with uh, that Yoma essence, right? So like they can turn it off and turn it on. And another point I just wanted to make real quick was, even though they get paid for their service, they don't actually revel in that payment. That goes straight to the organization. Like they always say like somebody from the organization will be along to collect or whatever, right? So it's like you're not even really paying them. They're just letting you know, hey, pay the guy. Or is it that how it goes? I could be mistaken.
I honestly can't remember. I don't know. My brain's totally freezing on that point. So let's just leave it that. Maybe we'll work out that Klippa later. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It was just a scene that kind of come to my mind. Like they just kind of walk off into the sunset. They're like, somebody will be
Right.
by to collect the money.
Right,
Like
right,
they don't
right.
even
The little
care
the
about
the
the money.
little you're right. It's like that little ninja guy. He's not really a ninja, but he's like a weird
Oh yeah, wearing the
yeah.
cloak or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
something
like
like that.
yeah, he's kind of but he's like extremely powerful. This is interesting. And yeah, so
Oh, okay.
that's exactly how it comes. Is like he's like the agent of the church. They pay, but they don't get paid themselves. He comes and collects it. So eventually what happens is you meet a Claymore named Claire, and then she meets a young boy who she saves. And although it's totally against the code, Claire sort of takes him in, but she also has her own motivations. So I don't
Now,
know.
can we examine that a little bit real quick?
Yes, sure.
Because now is the boy's name Rocky? This is just my memory trying to serve me from years ago, but I was trying to think of the names and wonder if there was any importance to them. But so to examine this a little bit, she maybe has a little more human in her than your typical silver-eyed witch, right? Because the
Yes.
way that she becomes a Claymore is a little bit different from how the organization typically, right? And so she's kind of like an
Rocky.
anomaly.
Yeah, Rocky. You were right.
Rocky, okay.
Yeah.
Which really,
Good job.
anytime I hear the name Rock or Rocky, it makes me think of like the pineal gland or the stone, the alchemical stone. I'm
Well,
not
it's
sure
interesting.
if that's.
Well, his
Yeah, go
family
ahead.
got eaten, right? So there is something kind of alchemical about that. Kind of like transgressive, non-normative. He has to kind of
Well,
arise from that.
isn't his arc also that he couldn't protect his sister or something? Like he's got some like personal trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got eaten,
Yeah.
but like he was also powerless to stop it or something.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. It's like he actually witnesses people getting eaten, like right in front of him. Pretty horrifying.
What
The
is it?
demons are pretty horrifying, to be honest.
And what is that? The like survivor's remorse or some type of psychological condition, like when people survive a tragedy, they kind of get like this almost like a fog where they're just why not me, like why did I survive, some type of thing like that. I think is what he's experiencing for a while, and kind of helps him navigate through that, I think.
Let me just say this really quick, is that I just looked up Rocky on the kanji Wiktionary. I know they're not written in kanji, but it's the Wiktionary for that. And so it means lucky. So it's like just the
Ooh, he was lucky.
Japanglish or whatever they call it, Japanglish. Yeah, Japanglish. It's that pronunciation. It's lucky, but in a Japanese accent, so they say it Rocky. So interesting,
Why?
because he is
Why
kind of
not mention
lucky.
it then? Yeah. So, but again, back to like why Claire may have reacted out of the ordinary. No other silver-eyed witch would have probably have shown Rocky that kind of warmness, that warmth, right? So, can we maybe just talk briefly then about what makes Claire unique?
So, well, again, spoiler alert, but we find out later that actually Claire self implants a demon organ, a heart, I believe, into her body, which is the normative way, but they actually do it at a much younger age and they start to do it. They do it in much, as you said, like they only do it in people who have like the potential for great mana expenditure. And Claire has actually a very limited mana capacity. So it's sort of it's kind of her fatal flaw, but it's not really because she learns to kind of work around it. So, which is, but it's a very, the girls have very tragic stories too. So basically it's the heart of her teacher. She implants it inside of her own chest. Her teacher gets killed by one of these evil, we won't necessarily reveal that. Well, yeah, we can. It's like it's a silver-eyed witch who turns into a demon. So her teacher, who is the best, ranked number one among all the silver-eyed witches, which is also interesting because there's a rank. Claire is ranked the last. So I think that that's part of like why she has empathy, why she is able to relate to him, and also her family was eaten by Yomas or the demons. So I think that it's all of those things, but I think it's also what you're saying. It's like, yeah, her degree of humanity is not only because she became a quote unquote Claymore silver-eyed witch later, but it's all, and not just because she has less demon, because the part that she chose, the heart, is actually part human too. So it was both. And I think the other thing is like what you said. It's like she's not quite as demonic, but that is a limitation in battle. But it also serves her perhaps to live more in the world. This is a very Buddhist idea, is that you can be a person, like a human being, like me. I say I'm a monkey. Why? Because I often live in that monkey mindful mind, the monkey mind, which is animal consciousness, animal realm consciousness. So some people live in Asura realm consciousness. Some people live in Naga realm consciousness. Some people live in demon realm consciousness. Like that's real. Like we would say that that's real. Those are just ways to be in the world. So maybe we take it more conceptually, but I think that all of the factors, like she doesn't have to be like that, but I think that she makes a choice. Well, we do find out she actually makes a choice. She actually chooses to be sort of a coherent unit for a while with Rocky. So it's interesting.
Well, do you think it's because he kind of serves as like a buoy or whatever? Like, is there ever? Because again, it's been so long since I've watched it, but is there any time where she's tempted to eat him or whatever? But at the same time, he keeps her kind of grounded and human, or reminds her about the humanity. So I kind of wonder if there's an element like that too. And he also has to help her. I think at one point she becomes exhausted and he has to feed her or something like that, because they have slower metabolisms, I think. Is kind of how it works.
Yeah, because they have the hyper recovery, right? They can even they can't regenerate limbs, I believe. I might be wrong. They might be able to, or maybe be able to reattach them. I think that's what it is. But yeah, I mean, he serves as her like quote unquote companion, where he does exactly what you say. He takes care of her. He and he does serve as an anchor for her, but he also holds her back in a way. He hates violence, so that's a problem. It becomes a problem several times, in fact, life or death problem. And he does not accept that he's not strong. So, and I'm not faulting him necessarily for that. I'm not actually, because like who predicts that their family's going to get eaten by demons? But I do think that, well, this is also interesting because he does actually decide that he needs to take up the sword and like actually get strong. So part of the at least the anime conclusion is that he realizes he needs to like step it up a little bit. And like if he doesn't want to engage, like if he doesn't want Claire to engage in physical violence, he decides that he must. So it's kind of interesting if you think about it, because he's a human, fully human, who has to kind of rise in level of both violence and skill to a demon, but he must still try and retain human consciousness. And Claire is more of a demon than a human, but she's also human, so she has to kind of level to a human place of consciousness. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting.
Well,
I think
kind of
the
meet
whole
in the
series
middle
is great.
then, right? Isn't that kind of a Parath synthesis? One's coming from the top down, the other's going from the bottom up. They kind of meet in the middle there with their bond.
Well, isn't it interesting, Joshua? There's like you could say that he is very lunar in orientation. Like you could make that argument because their Yoma powers are much stronger at night.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's when they're able to more fully transform. You know how they can do like the 10%, 20%, 30% sort of transformations?
Oh, okay. It's coming
That
back to
it
me now,
happens
yeah.
more at night. It happens more at night. Some of them can do it. Some of them can do it at different times. Like there are ones that can fight during the day, but in general, I think it's mentioned several times. Like they're much stronger at night. The ranking is also really interesting too, just simply because it's a huge plot point. It's a major. It's something that comes up perennially throughout the story. Is the ranking, is like the who's at the number one, and like we find out later that actually those at number one and at the bottom as well are actually in most danger of sort of sort of becoming boundless in their limitations of containing the Yoma power, and they actually can become archdemons. So this is sort of who are also the progenitors of the lesser Yoma. So, and also the silver-haired witches. So it's like a very cyclical kind of process. Like you make the witch, she becomes an archdemon. The archdemon makes the little demons. Then you make the witches, so you can fight the demons and so on and so forth. But it's like it's a cycle of samsara, continuity, suffering, even.
Right. Well, and wasn't the number one that Claire ate the heart of, what she ranked number one and able to maintain it because she was able to somehow keep her, she didn't approach her threshold very easily because of her unique ability, right?
Well, that's the whole thing, is like this is one of those animes that does play a lot into the otaku kind of the math cell. Any math cells that may, or I think that there will be at least one that we both know might be listening to this. And so this is a very math cell series because it they everything they talk about is very much about it's a game of percentages, min-maxing. That's the WoW term, right?
Yeah,
And like
man.
all the other MMORPGs, min-max. This is a very min-max series. And so they catalog, and using very analogical, very Hode-like thinking, they categorize every little, like oh, that she's using all her powers and like whatever percentage, and then they divide it like in other terms as well, like are they close combat, far combat, medium combat, what is their like special, is that better? Then they have like the transformation. Some people can transform their arms, some people transform their whole bodies, some people don't change necessarily in physical appearance other than fangs, but they'll like be super fast. So there's lots of different ways that they kind of engage with this idea of looking at it in a very kind of Nietzschean way, maybe you could even say. I don't know, but maybe because they're kind of looking at like what is the optimal soldier? What is the optimal killing machine?
Well, and that's what made, I think her name was Teresa, right? Teresa of the Faint Smile was her nickname, and
That was so
it's
great. It's a
I think
great, it's a bar. It is. That's a bar. Teresa the Faint Smile. That's cool. That was some writer sitting in his like little Tokyo apartment or Seoul apartment. I don't know. But yeah, that was bars. That was like, you could say Dakini language right there. I'm just kidding, but
well, and
maybe.
I'm glad you agree, because the question I was going to ask is, did you think that maybe upon reflection on Teresa, was she modeled after some type of goddess figure? Because I know sometimes in the I'm not sure if I'll butcher this, of course, but the Hindu tradition, they got a lot of, sometimes they'll have different expressions on their face, or the way their eyes are squinting or giving a glare or a smile or something. So I was like, I wonder if Teresa the Faint Smile actually is analogous to some type of figure, like an entity.
You're getting too good for me, Joshua, because this is true. Exactly what you're saying. There is a Tara, but all goddesses are really a Tara. They're all stars that self-combust. But yeah, you could say there's a form of Tara that is described as having a faint smile. And Tara is, of course, the most powerful because she transcends all goddesses. She's a Buddha, not really a goddess, but part of how you can understand her is at that cosmological goddess layer. So I think that that's also a big part of it. It's like the faint smile. Why? She's not scared of anybody. She doesn't need to smile big. She doesn't need to be ferocious. She knows she can. She's already conquered the four worlds. It's no problem for her. So I do think that there is a kind of, whether you want to say it's like directly inspired by like a Buddhist logic or not, I think that there is like a metaphysical layer that can be understood as like a goddess, exactly what you said. Like even Claire, she is very victory, she is very justice. Like there's
Yeah.
these elements that they are playing with kind of aeonic archetypes, you could call it, like justice, liberty, all the different ones. So I do think that you're right. I think that you could maybe even interestingly place them in different nodes and sort of like categorize them like that. I'm not saying that I'm going to do
Yeah.
that. I'm not, but I think
Claymore
you could.
Kabbalah.
I think you could. You could make a Claymore Kabbalah for sure.
And so what kind of lended itself to this grin wasn't her ability. She could see a few moments. She could see into the future to some degree. Wasn't that she had predictive prescience or something like that? Was that her skill? And then is that associated with her eyes? Because like you said, some of them could do different things with their body parts. Was her thing in her eyes, maybe?
So this is really interesting because she was obviously the most, they said that she's the most powerful, but people often underestimate her because she didn't physically transform. She contained the demonic nature within her. So as you know, because you are actually really good at Kabbalah, you're not like like someone else who I'm pulling through the threshold. You definitely are. We speak the exact same language on a lot of this. So yeah, I think perception, Hesed, happens through your eyes. I think that's the Sephira I like to associate with Tara the most. She is the infinite capacity for loving kindness, mercy in the world. And so she's blue green, obviously, but then you're going to say, well, there's silver. Well, there's actually 22 forms of Tara, who all have different colors. And you can kind of understand it post conceptually as well, where it's all just Arya Tara, white Tara. So I definitely. Yes, it's in her eyes because perception is in your eyes. That's where it all begins and ends, kind of like all reality, at least. At least it's the primary sense, right? Not maybe the only, but it's the one that collects light. It's the most metaphysical, maybe, of all of them, and it forms reality in your mind. So I definitely, yes. Her precognitive ability comes from like her mind, perception, and her eyes seeing things or perceiving them, meaning in the outer way, like Tara's often described as like the hearer. So you could also say it like that. But obviously, with Teresa, we're talking more of the eyes. Her sense perception is like sped up, it's like in a different timeline. So you could also think of it like that.
Yeah, I see what you're meaning. And so it's kind of like the Matrix, right? Where there's that moment where the bullets are just really slow and he doesn't even have to try and avoid them anymore. I think she kind of has whatever Neo gets in a sense, right? Something similar to that. It's like she can read the code and kind of already know what's going to happen before it happens. And when Claire eats of her, right, doesn't she get like that's kind of becomes part of her ability, right? So despite her low energy level potential, she also has this like high end ability that kind of makes it work somehow, right? Keeps her from ever having to cross the threshold in the first place.
See, this is so interesting because again, going to that otaku kind of like conception of their powers, when they like take off the limitations of those sort of gates, that's a very good way to say it. And they even, I think, describe it in a similar, if not that exact way. I can't remember. But they do describe it in a certain way. So there is a kind of metaphysics. It's not deep or anything, but it's interesting. And so, yeah, it is like that. Well, Claire turns out to be one of the more powerful ones, right? Like Claire is able to like unlock more of her power, but she also comes back. She also comes back from like 90%. So they always say like you can't go over like certain people who don't have good mana control cannot go over certain percentages is how it often works or always works. And so Claire having a low mana capacity cannot go over like 30% of her demon power. But there's a time where she actually has to invoke 90% of it. And so this is where she could easily turn into an archdemon. And I think it's actually when she's fighting an archdemon, perhaps. And so Rocky is the one who kind of pulls her back to Malkuth, is even how you could describe it. She's like reaching Apotheosis, reaching Tiferet, maybe looking at Dath, getting all this like the crazy demonic knowledges of the universe. It's all available to her, downloading into her body, but it's not just contained in knowledge like how us as Kabbalists would think of it. It's actually more than that. It's actually almost like you could even say maybe even genetic information or quantum. It's quantum kind of rays that actually change her body, because it's all just process of consciousness, but you can also describe it also using Kabbalah. So I definitely think that, yeah, sorry, Joshua, please go ahead.
He's like her Marcus Aurelius that I was talking about earlier. Rocky's, as she's nearing apotheosis, it's like the emperor having that guy being like, "Hey, you're not a god. You're human." So like he brings her back from the brink, right? Because if she reaches that point, she severs her connection to humanity, and that's kind of what don't they call these things ascended beings? Like once they cross
So
into apotheosis.
that's really interesting. So what you're saying is really interesting and a little transgressive. So of course I really like it. Um, yes, they call them awakened beings, maybe using more Buddhist language, or I don't know the exact because I don't speak Japanese, so I don't know the exact thing. I've just seen the subs, so awakened beings or whatever. And yeah, they are kind of beings that have a higher they have magic. That's basically what it is like they have high magical capability because they're able to be meta real. They can interact with reality through their thoughts. Their psychic power is so powerful, so strong, can destroy a kingdom, no problem. One archdemon can destroy a kingdom. One archdemon
Oh,
could probably
hey,
destroy the world.
and I got a note here. I'm glad you brought that up. So, can we talk a little bit about how the organization, quote unquote, counters an ascended being? They'll dispatch a unit specific for the ascended being, right?
Yeah, they try and catch it right before the transformation or right after, because the longer an ascended being is alive, the more DNA, and this is specifically what it is, there's like the more they eat, the more powerful they become, the more they kill even, because like their ability to sort of read the genetic code or the sort of like the eat the meat, you could say, is actually through all their body, is like through their tentacles they generate or their limbs or whatever it is. So they're actually able to they're hungry. That's what the whole thing is. Even when I was trying to get there, I'm sorry Joshua, I didn't quite get there, but the like when Claire comes out, she's like, I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
That's very much like a Dakini kind of idea. It very much. Like you see them, they have the fangs, vampires, vampiric, ferocious, bloodthirsty,
Yeah, yeah.
hungry. But the
Well,
whole
wait,
thing
it's
is
also,
like,
I was just going to interject real quick.
no,
Also, you see
absolutely.
this in anime a lot of times, like with Goku and Dragon Ball Z. He went and fought big thing and then has to come home to Chi-Chi cooking him a big meal or whatever, and he just spends like so much time eating. That kind of reminds me of this.
So it is. It's so, but the whole thing is if you want to transcend that consciousness, you have to withhold. That's the whole thing, is like withholding. So if you see a couple like Buddhist figures in Yab Yam in concert yoga, some of the ideas, not all the ideas, but some of the ideas is to withhold that bliss state, interpret that as you want. But these are all just states of consciousness. We're not talking about the actual physical thing, just like it's shown in the show. In some ways, showing it as hunger, as a sense pleasure, is the same thing, but it's actually it's like there's a deeper language to it than just showing it being like horny or whatever. It's she if you can overcome that and bring yourself back down from bliss. And they even describe it as that. They even describe it as like a very almost approximating an orgasm, excuse me. Very much. So it's like, can they even calm down all the way? Did you goon too far or whatever? I'm not
They're
trying to be
edging.
gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it but it is kind of like that. They even have some of there's specific times where it happens to other characters where it is kind of just, I can't stop it. Like there is something very sexual about it. I'm just saying, just just
Yeah, I mean,
observational.
I totally didn't see it, but now I do. Like looking back, but at the time, I don't think I saw it as obviously. But you're right; it is a lot like that. And I wanted to mention, since it's sort of relevant still to this topic. So when they do hit that threshold, uh, there's something called a black card. Do you know what I'm talking about? So they
Where
produce a
they're
black.
issued a death order, as in like the
Yeah,
other girls. Yes, okay,
they
yes, I
put out
completely
their
remember
black
this.
card, and it
Hmm.
basically puts a hit on them from the
Hmm.
organization, but they do it to themselves, right? So like it's
Hmm.
part of their code of conduct. Can you maybe talk about that just briefly, if you know more about it?
So, what I can remember is that so it's people who are close to turning or that they suspect. but it can also be witches, we'll call them, or claymores, as the maybe colloquial parlance. Sometimes they ask too many questions. Sometimes they don't listen well to orders. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have human relationships. This is the most taboo thing you can possibly do, is to have sex. So again, but not just sex. It's not like it's not like they're joining brothels. I'm talking about consort yoga, as in like a householder with householder, meaning one man, one person. So that this is the most taboo idea, is kind of is monogamy. Interesting. So the church really doesn't like monogamy. So between claymores, at least, maybe they like in the general population, but I would say from the degenerated sort of level of society, that the church doesn't really promote it for other people. So it can be any of those reasons. It's multivariate. So they issue the black card and they'll send the next sequence of girls. So like for Teresa, we'll use that because she gets a black card. They send like the third strongest, the fourth strongest, the fifth strongest, the seventh strongest, but they send like multiple. It's like I think there's like 4 different squadrons in the end. But then they also do this against archdemons, and so sometimes what they'll do, this is really interesting, and I know you'll know exactly what I mean. They'll send whole squadrons against specific archdemons, and it's kind of a kill mission. It's kind of like we're killing off that squadron. So they do that too. The church in the show is a very nefarious organization in terms of, if you like the Silver Witches, who are performing an existential role fundamentally to preserve humanity, although they also co-create with the demons, that's the problem. But yeah, they definitely are treated very poorly. They're in a subaltern position, maybe you could even say, like a sort of oppressed person's caste.
Well, it's because they typically prey on these people who are already invulnerable. Like, typically aren't their families already victims of Yoma attacks or something like that? So you're kind of like adopting into the organization these broken individuals, and then you're providing them empowerment, right, to take revenge or whatever it might be motivating them, but that at the same time they're seen as expendable, but they don't realize that, probably, right? So it's almost like they're making a deal with the devil in a sense to, here, you want power to get revenge, well, we'll give it to you, but then at any moment their number could be up and the organization just decides to like extinguish them, right, for their own political reasons. Oh, you're getting too popular, or you're too skilled. We don't want to do too good of a job killing these demons.
The guy says that little troll guy, he even says that.
Yeah.
He doesn't. They don't want them to do too well, and
they
don't want them too strong because the church is scared. Fundamentally, that's one of the ideas of like, yeah, it's a little bit of like a new wave feminist kind of thing. There is a little bit of that. It definitely makes sense because it is a Korean series. It was at that time on the internet. That was kind of what Korean internet was talking about. How do I know this?
Well, and to that point, isn't Teresa's black card? It's unmerited, right? That isn't hers, because you have the option of drawing your own if you know you've gotten to a limit. But for her, wasn't it that she couldn't turn? That was one of the ideas for Teresa. She was kind of, that's why she was a saint, like very Saint Teresa. Like, depending on which one, I'm not talking about Mother Teresa, I'm talking about Saint Teresa of Lisieux, but there are other, obviously, Saint Teresas. Saint Teresa of Lisieux also does a faint smile. She's also a French saint, so that's how I know. I'm glad you brought that up again, because as we were talking, it reminded me of the Mona Lisa. That's very Teresa, the faint smile, when you think about it.
Well, it is, and it probably does draw from these kind of, like, it's very steeped in European kind of, at least, aesthetics, right? So
it's like, what does she know?
Well, that's kind of what it is. So she does know something, because she's able to bring herself consistently, she's able to bring herself consistently down from orgasm, if you want to liken it. I'm using a gross term, but it's not quite that. It's more apotheosis, but you can describe it in more carnal terms.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. A lot of self-control.
It's like very strong self-control. Also recognizing like you don't give in to desire all the time. Like it's like that. Also, like it appeals to me in a Buddhist way. It's like very like, okay, you're bringing it back inside. And she's also using it to like to fight people. And she also is a battle junkie. So that's also another interesting kind of thing about Teresa is she does love a strong opponent because she herself is almost godlike. She's almost an
Well,
archdemon in her strength.
yeah, and it kind of reminds me too, like the moment of her death, doesn't she get decapitated?
So it's a cheap shot. She gets
Yeah, and doesn't she
distracted
say
for like
like she didn't see that coming? You know, for her, that must have been sweet release, right? Because to never experience novelty, this was the first time she'd ever didn't see it coming. So I think that's also something to appreciate about this scene.
absolutely. Absolutely it is. It's all about how she kind of she's the saint, so she's like untouchable in a way, and then what does her in, what is her, ending is that she gets hit with a cheap shot. That's really what happens. She's not in perception. She's in perception, I think, Claire, actually, which is interesting, maybe metaphysically, but no, I mean, she definitely, it was not it wasn't like some, oh, she's losing the battle. She was probably going to win. And then she gets murked. Like, yeah, it's a cheap shot. That's the best way I can describe it. But
Yeah, so
yeah,
she's top rank when you're following the rules, but then it was somebody who didn't play against and see, maybe that's part of the reason she was so good was within these certain boundaries rules, as there's no way to get around her, but novelty or that unpredictability, that cheap shots, what was her like downfall in a way. And I would love to have been able to remember the scene more specifically, but what they did to her was the same strategy they would have used against an ascended being. So they were already treating her as if she had changed, right? The way they were kind of marking her for removal. And the thought I had written down here that I wanted to kind of mention to you, like you said, they released squads with different ranks in the mix. And I could have this wrong, but just from what I was reading a few days ago, it was like they typically send out like a squad of 5, and it'll be 4 claymores of various ranks with 1 single digit mixed in. And that's typically enough to like overtake an ascended being. And I just thought that was,
min-maxing,
yeah.
min-maxing,
And I
total
just thought that
min-maxing.
was, very Hode and Netsack, because like
Mhm.
your 4 supporting members are like your Hode, and then you got your 1 single digit Netsack who's expected
Mhm.
to obtain victory, essentially.
Fortress. Yep.
And so I thought maybe that too kind of matched like the even when you were talking about Aeon on the daughter the other day, you're stressing the 4 and the 1 and the 5, and I thought, oh, that reminded me of the Claymore thing, where it's like the 4 Claymore are like the 4 elements, and then you got spirit, which is like the commanding portion of it, the head of it, if you will, of the body. So that was just something that kind of came to mind that I want to mention as well.
So there's a ton of Kabbalistic. Sorry about that, Joshua.
It's
Okay. I had to cough quickly. Not a weed cough. Claire's number is 47. I'm looking at my notes right now. A little late.
Which I meant to ask you that earlier. That is Trump's number, and you see 47 a lot in things. I do anyway, and it's a very strange number. For instance, in Ukraine, there's the 47th Mechanized Brigade, which is like the Azov battalion, neo-Nazi type one, and it's been eliminated so many times it shouldn't even exist, but they keep it alive by feeding it more personnel, but they keep the unit alive in that way. And so I always wonder, like, why is it so special to use that number, So I've always found the 47 kind of interesting anyway, but you find it's ubiquitous. That I see it a lot. So why 47? Why not 50? I think it was chosen on purpose.
It absolutely was. I mean, there's no getting around it. Like we said, there is a kind of hermeneutic in this. There is a kind of metaphysics in this. Is it like clean, like medieval Kabbalah, like we talk about every week? No. No, we all discuss the system that is the most kind of basal. And then everyone else kind of is already built off of it, but through the basal system, actually, you'll get more. The idea is that you'll be able to like kind of grow more in your knowledge, more at your own pace, rather than, and you won't encounter so many like kind of deviations, as we were talking about pre-recording. So 47, obviously 4 and 7 is 11. You can also say that's Hesed and Netzach. That's one way to describe it. You can also say 11 as in Dath. That's not, I don't, you, as you know, Joshua, I prefer 5 for death, but yeah, that, you can absolutely say it's 11 too. And you can also say it is a kind of in and out, the polarities. It's very much the polarities. So one thing is really interesting, and this isn't really about 47, but I will come back to it, is when there are different ways to break down numbers metaphysically. I have a little bit more of a traditional way to do it, and I also try and look at it from different angles. So, one way to think of 47 is 4 to the seventh power. So, that is 16,384. So, if we break that number down further, we get 7, 11, and 4. So, 11, 11, which is 22. Because the only number you're really allowed to condense 11 with is itself. And you can see her glyph. So this is something that I probably should have brought up. My bad. All the claymores are ascribed a glyph, a sword glyph. Now, I am not a Runa brother, as you know, at all. I'm complete retard in that sense. So I don't know what rune it resembles. Please don't. I don't know. Like I'm as dumb as anyone else when it comes to that. But I can see that there's an alchemical similarity to the glyph for Uranus. Obviously, Uranus and Aquarius have a lot to do with the age of Aquarius, both of those planets together. Like, but the star and the planet together. Like, one can actually refer to a higher and lower quality of the same thing. So if you look at it like that and then interpret her name, obviously Claire means light. Interestingly, Saint Claire is an exorcist saint. I'm sure that's not really an accident, to be honest, because obviously Saint Therese of Lisieux is also an exorcist saint who had what we would probably consider in Buddhism clear light visions, pure visions of gods and demons battling each other. So Uranus, in the way I like to think of Uranus, now brother Matt's a little different, but he'll talk about it more as I mean, I agree with him, obviously, 100%, but it is a flexible system. But for my purposes and our purposes, maybe I've always likened it to a kind of planetary density of Kether. So it's not Kether, but there's something similar about their qualities, at least in some degree, right? So this is a very Aeon of the Daughter series, and this is something that you and I talked about when you kind of pitched it to me. Not that I wouldn't accept any, I would have taken any series, honestly, Joshua, but Claymore held special kind of interest for me. So, and I think this actually might be why. I think it is an Aeon of the Daughter series, and I think it's very explicitly so. Before even I even knew what that framework was, even had a name, before any of that, like I wouldn't have necessarily been able to differentiate it from like Babylon story. But I think that if you look at it and look at her purity, look at her kind of like love is very important in the story. It is kind of a love story, but like a quiet love and almost like a sad love. Maybe that's what love kind of is. So um I think it's actually also referring to that ineffable, as we discussed before. Isn't that interesting? You always say that every time we talk. It's like we always come around to these things that we've already referenced, like very much like we're working through the Akashic archives together. It's kind of profound, to be honest.
Well, I mean, if your conversation isn't getting to the root or heart of the matter, then what is it doing, you know? And I think that if you talk about anything long enough, that you kind of end up in an inevitable. If you're really trying to dissect an idea, you're going to end up there eventually. And that might be like we were talking about earlier, the ontological framework that's kind of behind a lot of things. If you keep going behind the curtain, you're gonna see similar things no matter what it is you started out with, you know. And that's what I like so much about that particular model, or Kabbalah in general, is it kind of helps you peek behind the scenes, you know. It makes it easier to kind of communicate too, even if people are from different cultures, if you're both kind of coming at it from that, with that goal in mind, I guess, is to get to that space where it's like, well, I am at a loss for words. Now I've found myself in the ineffable realm.
So there are two other things. I totally agree with you 100%. I think that that's the nature of like like this show and our show that we obviously do together. It's like all of us. It's so weird to say that, Joshua. Like our show. Like I'm not trying to be cheese, but like it does make me feel like a little teary, a little, to be honest. Like to say that, like it's our show. It's kind of cool. Anyways, I'm sorry. I'll
Is.
cut that. But it does kind of make me like a little sad. Like not sad. It's like it's incredible, really. So but okay, sorry, back to reality. Um Half awakening. This is a really important point for Claire because when she is able to come back from that bliss consciousness state, she increases all her powers magnified by like hundreds. She becomes like the most powerful Claymore. She becomes, or the witch. She becomes the most. She every power that she had, and she wasn't weak. Like yes, we did say she's the weakest one. She can kill any human. It's like no problem for her. She can kill most Yoma. In fact, she's actually a good witch in that way. Is that she actually is a good fighter. She isn't an airhead. She's very smart. She's very analytical. She's very capable even though she isn't necessarily the most physically potent. She's maybe the most prepared in her consciousness, even you could say. And that's also a quality of her teacher. So again, this goes along to her power pre-awakening and then post-awakening. Her power pre-awakening is called acute Yoki or Yoma sensing, meaning that she's able to sense if there are any yokai in the or yomas in the area. And that was also part of Teresa's ability was that she was able to see the kind of shadow, subtle energies of the world. She could physically
Their
see
aura.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, the auras. And so that also meant the auras of other claymores or other witches. So after that, she actually started to be able to use more of Claire's abilities. One thing we didn't discuss was her meeting with Irene. This was extremely significant, I thought. And I also thought it was very, very, very wuxia, like very Shaw Brothers movie, like the one-armed swordsman, but not even that. This is like a really interesting wuxia trope from that genre. Is this kind of a swordsman who lives in the woods, who is the most incredible, the number one of her generation, and she abandoned the organization. She lives in the woods, and like basically she's like a wandering swordswoman. I mean, it's like you can't get any more wuxia than that. Like, go watch any King Hu movie. Like A Touch of Zen has this exact character. Come Drink with Me has this very very similar character. So this is like it's all interrelated, really. Like this is all part of like definitely more East Asian kind of cosmology. But yeah, I'm sure there are European stories. I'm just not, as you know, I'm not. I don't know that material at all. So I can only speak to what I do know. So but yeah, I would say this has a very wuxia flavor for me. And she ends up actually giving her arm. So the way that she became the one-armed swordswoman is she cuts off her arm and gives it to Claire, who lost her arm in a battle with an awakened being. And then by adopting Irene's arm, Claire actually has to she changes the way Irene does it. So Irene does it through it's like she can do this like lightning sword thing where her arm like is like moving like basically at the speed of sound or the speed of light. I can't remember what they say, but I think it's the speed of sound. And Claire is not really able to do it because she doesn't have enough mana capacity. But then when she gets the arm, she can do it in bursts. So actually, where Irene was maybe more delicate in her application of it, because it was just like she could just do it endlessly. She could just do it for a long time. Claire actually does it stronger, but it's shorter times. Interesting, right? Compared to Aeonic cycles. I'm just thinking.
That's
out
also
loud.
very Aries as well. Intense, energetic bursts, but not for a long time. That's very Aries.
She also learns another technique from people that she ends up killing or that she ends up eating, Rafaela and Flora. So she absorbs Rafaela's memories and she learns the fighting style of Rafaela. So basically, she becomes preciser in her movements and her body is more resilient, I would say. She's kind of like able to sense with her whole body. And then she masters the Flora's signature move, Wind Cutter, because she's obviously, I said she was not able to precisely mimic Irene's power. So it in a way, Claire is very much the adamantine girl. You could say. I was thinking it the whole time. I was like, wow, she even is called like a semi-awakened being. It's like very much like an Enochian story. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see what you mean there. That is like Diamond Thunder, right? Like the adamantine is, she becomes hardened in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's all about their Yoma energy, their capacity for like channeling it into the limbs, into their brain, into their all their organs and outside of them as well, because it's also an aura. So it's absolutely adamantine, like absolutely adamantine. And that is an interesting, I think it's an interesting way to look at it. It's like a kind of replacement almost of the sun, whereas Rocky obviously goes to train later in swordsmanship and becomes a relatively good adventurer. But can a man ever stand up to a semi-awakened being? Well, probably not. Not in the normal sense, but maybe in anime physics, yes.
Can you talk about any of the enemy type characters, like for instance, like Priscilla? Because it wasn't Priscilla the one that killed Teresa, I could guess. But like, there's some of these characters that are kind of it's kind of like in a video game. Like, you encounter a boss that, this is a vigor check. If you can't beat the boss, you need more HP. And so it's almost like there's certain characters that Claire encounters at these pivot moments. I almost see it as like she's walking the Kabbalah and she enters these different Sphero at times, and this is like these different characters kind of help her along her path, I guess. But like, what would somebody like Priscilla maybe present? Or I don't know, I guess that's enough to play with the idea.
Sorry, Joshua, that was a totally Jin moment where I was speaking, but I also muted myself. So yeah, that's okay. So Priscilla, the one-horned monster, as they call her. Also interesting that her glyph is also similar to Uranus. So, but it's also similar to now that I'm looking at it, there's something trident about it, like very Neptune. Actually, that's what I'm going to say. It's more Neptunian. So that is very interesting. And I think that she is the most powerful of the Claymores in her generation, aside from Teresa. Teresa is explained to be like kind of an interstitial generation. Like by the time that Priscilla comes around, Teresa is kind of like the stately older figure, although they don't age at the same time because she's not actually old. But she's able to kind of when she comes up and she rises very fast in the ranks because of her strength, she comes against like this, she has intense jealousy and she has no self-control, and that's shown in the flashbacks. She's very, when she goes and she kind of reaches that orgasmic state, like she completely gives in to that. Like she loves it. Like she's not gonna like come back to human level. And so basically she she kills a bunch of people. Like that's what happens. She kills trying to think of all their names. Sophia, Noelle. I think she ends up killing Irene. I can't remember, but or the church does. I really can't remember. But she basically she becomes on a mission to kill Teresa. She becomes a awakened Yoma, awakened demon, an archdemon. So she's an incredible character. She basically has limited Yoma, unlimited, limitless. They even call it limitless Yoma power. So she definitely is not a character that anyone could really go up against. Like she considers herself the most powerful. So she's in an interesting way, she's extremely flawed and extremely powerful, where Teresa is much less flawed and much more powerful. But I wouldn't say I think Teresa actually was going to beat her if I remember the fight correctly. But what happened was is they took the opportunity to do a cheap shot, like as we said. So it was in a 1-to-1, Teresa would have beat her. So the better person, you could say, would have beat her. So going back to your idea of the rules, like who is better? So this person who's much more Neptunian, Neptune is also very much informed by Mars. People really forget that relationship, that Gevra Hokmah connection, Mars, Neptune, very, very important in like the creation of reality. And so Neptune is in many ways very susceptible to the fire of Mars because that space is smoky and empty. So if you fill it with heat, it's gonna, be rough. So I'm using that as a conceptual way to sort of look at her character. Like she's very much governed by her emotions. Maybe someone else that we may or may not know mutually, but very much governed by those martial fires. Very much governed by her desires. That's very much martial as well. Lust doesn't have to be sex. Obviously, there is a sexual component with it, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be just worldly desires, and her worldly desires to be number one. And she's very childish. And then she becomes extremely Manichaean and then very jealous. So basically, she killed Teresa by pretending to be a human.
Ah,
And so she uses Teresa's saint-like nature. She's very like out, she's not stable. And in her archdemon form, she kills a lot of people. And they say it's going to take us years. The guy from the church, it's going to take us years to recover the numbers. So that's how dangerous like these archdemons are, or they're like angels. You could also say that. And their inclination sort of like to consume and to eat everything, to return everything to like the primordial. I would say it's like they're kind of anti-Buddhist. They're not really like their role isn't necessarily cosmic good. They're kind of anti-cosmic. And even later on, we learn that the sort of governing council are these awakened beings who are called abyssals. So you have
yeah.
some Lovecraftian, Neptunian things right in that.
Well,
I
and
know, that was
I
a
wanted to
meandering.
circle back to something. I wasn't ever able to find what her glyph looked like, but I did find Claire's glyph, and it refreshed my memory. And the rune I think you were looking for was it's ALGZ Algiz. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's it's associated with discernment, like spiritual discernment and the higher self. And, as I was reading about it, it says that this is the rune typically associated with Valkyries, which of course the Claymores are very Valkyrie-esque, I guess, when you think about it, agents of death and such. But it said the role of a Valkyrie is not necessarily to bring punishment, but also to soften the blow of punishment. So there's like a nice mercy severity kind of element there as well. But I just wanted to mention that because I thought that was pretty. It was intriguing to me.
I'm sending you Claire, or not Claire's, excuse me. I'm sending you Priscilla's GIF in the chat right now. So that was great. Thank you so much, Joshua. Algies. You know what's so funny? So funny. I was just before we recorded, I was thinking to myself, this was before I even prayed. I was sitting down, I was kind of like thinking of things, magical languages, right? Because I go over like what we talk about in our spaces, like in my head quite frequently. just simply because they're obviously very far-ranging, very discursive, very tantric, in my opinion, and they're very interesting to hear what everyone has to say in synthesis. So it is something that I think about. So I was thinking about magical languages in general, and like actually I did. There was a time in my life where I did actually used to do magical language in runes. However, I did not understand anything other than like the outer presentation of what those things are. So I would write them all over like my AP tests. Like if you were to pull my AP tests, they probably don't still have them. But if they did, you would find runes all over them. So I just thought, wow, that's so funny. Always comes full circle.
Well, and hers looks it's pretty much identical to Claire's, except it's got two hats, I guess, on the arms. So I think it's kind of peculiar to me that Priscilla and Claire's runes are so similar. It's
Well,
there's
they could
probably
go either
something
way.
there. Yeah, there's probably something there. That's
Well, they're
self-awareness
both.
and no awareness, kind of like opposites.
That's right. That's it right there. What you just said. Because why is that? Because Claire is closer to humanity in love. Priscilla is closer to humanity in her jealousy. If you want to give it like a really gross poison of the mind.
Yeah, because
Like,
she's
what is her
jealous of
pathos?
Teresa, but
Mhm.
also homicidal because she eats like 5 towns worth of people and stuff like that. It kind of reminds me in an oblique sort of way to the villains that we see in Full Metal Alchemist, where they're willing to sacrifice like entire towns just to get a philosopher's stone or whatever it is. So kind of reminds me of that sort of trope.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that she's in many ways the opposite of Claire in a way. And she is, it's this is the thing. You and I both, I think, in general, agree that a metal path approach to life, not just metaphysics or Kabbalah, perhaps is the best. I'm not talking politics, obviously, but just maybe more coming from that perspective of sort of synthesis, as you mentioned before, and also rectification, meaning like you're not going to repeat. Doesn't necessarily have to be like on the ground wailing of all the sins you did, but perhaps you just sort of you don't repeat those old habits. You break habituation. Very Buddhist idea, very Christian metaphysical idea as well. Like you break the bonds of sin. So I think that Claire shows that you can do that through love. Priscilla shows that you can do that through transgression and through sin. But Priscilla ends up wanting to die. So
Well, but not in this in the Norse sense though. Like, isn't she looking for somebody to best her? Like she's it's kind of like that that trope in some video games. There's usually like a character that's uber powerful, just searching for a formidable.
well, that's
adversary.
Teresa. I would say Priscilla becomes like that. Priscilla becomes like that. And she definitely, when she becomes awakened, she adopts some of those traits of actually Teresa. It's kind of interesting. Like very like battle junkie, loves testing strength. But I would say she's much weaker. This is my perception. This might be wrong, but I think she's much like more schizophrenic in consciousness when we see her.
But that's a natural side effect of awakening, right? Doesn't it just the human mind to kind of go nuts? And so
Yes,
become
yes, it
sociopaths?
intensifies everything that she was before. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to make a through way. Her human stage of consciousness is so scattered already, so schizophrenic that when she becomes awakened, it like intensifies all those desires, like they liken it in the show to hunger. And so it intensifies those desires like by magnitudes. So all of those things that she believes of the world, all the Klippos, they become very real for her. Like she wants battling, she wants food, she wants, she wants her will. She wants to exert her will on the world.
Yeah, but it's a it's I saw one of these sites I was reading about her. They, they characterized her, and as far as trope was concerned, it said she was a tragic one-man army. That was her archetype. Thought that was kind of interesting. It's like Netsack with no hode.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Like you can even say that about Claire and Rocky. Is that like maybe Rocky doesn't make it all the way up with Claire, but in a way, like that is kind of their relationship, at least at first. She is the fortress, she is the protector. He has no physical abilities. He would just get eaten in one swing of a demon's claw. Like that's how weak the humans are. So, she serves as that fortress, that shield for him as the young prince of Hode to sort of travel up. But she's also that character as well, but she's not a prince. Then this is why I always say, like, it doesn't have to be embodied in transgenderism. It does not. There are many versions of the story where it is not that way. And a more dharmic and more East Asian way is not like that.
But can we explore that real quick? Because there is a gender element here. Why? I'll let you answer the question. Why are there no male Claymores?
Well, this is really interesting. So I'm so glad you asked me, Joshua, because this is exactly the same in Tantra. There are many more women skilled in karma mudra, sex yoga, than there are men, although there are many more men who claim to practice it. Women, in general, are considered to have higher potential in coming down from the bliss state. Now, this is not, you don't have to just take my word for it. You can go read June McDaniel's excellent ethnography on Kali Tantra in West Bengal and how she interviewed dozens of prostitutes, both Brahmin and Chandali, meaning both high caste and outsider caste. So both of those are considered to be acceptable in Tantra for sex yoga. So this is obviously not Buddhist karma mudra, but it's Indian, so it's close enough. It's good metaphor for what we're talking about. So if you read those, you can see, everybody says, there are so few practitioners. I've done it like this many times, but every single time they finish. The men always finish, and they sometimes they've led on the girls. Like sometimes the girls are the women. It's not girls, it's women. They will be very skilled practitioners, and then they will meet a guy who seems to be skilled in all his outer ways. So they say, okay, we'll agree to it, because you can't stop the sadhana. You can't stop once you've started. Some of these sadhanas, I'm not talking about any. Anyways, you can't stop them. So if it's like a full Nitya cycle, so a full 16 days, 16 nights, then it has to be done on all those times. It has to. Like there's no getting out of it. So they commit to these times, and obviously they get paid for their services. But it's also about part of the sadhana, like they're taking part in it. So they're actually going to increase their own power. But the problem is like if you wreck the sadhana, which is what happens if you finish for some of them, most of them, is that it wrecks the sadhana for both consorts, or the man and the consort. So basically that's why I know that was like quite meandering. People are probably wondering why I'm bringing up Tantric India. It makes sense because men in this series that's even what the church guy says. Men really can't say no to the hunger. They get one taste, one little bit of the Yoma blood, and they're gone. And we find out this is true.
They become ascended beings. They go straight to the banal.
Carnal. Yes, exactly. They go straight to the carnal ground. They become an ascended master right away. So I do think that's interesting, of course. And I think the idea is that obviously the women are more able to resist the bliss state, but really only Teresa and Claire are shown to be able to really fully resist it. So it obviously also shows that it's not just in the gendered archetype. It is in specific embodiments of those archetypes. Someone who is fundamentally saint-like, as well as fundamentally, maybe you could even say, not to us at the Grey Lodge, but the daughter archetype.
Well, and that's also the premise that kind of supports in the Dune universe, God Emperor Leto's all-woman army of fish speakers. He said that the male army would eventually turn on its citizens that designed to protect, but a female army had that restraint that was somehow necessary to keep it from becoming all-consuming. You know, so there is kind of suggested that there's something about women that maybe it's not in their nature to be violent, even though they're capable of it. So that might be another way to kind of package that. But tangentially, I wanted to mention too, I was reading some of Priscilla's lore, and this was a detail I had forgotten, that part of cursed state as an awakened being was the human side of her. Priscilla, as flawed as she was, still had that yearning to die. And so she, when eating towns full of people, she seemed incapable of preying upon potential claymores, which meant she couldn't eat girls. She like the human side of her would prevent her from doing that, because that human part of Priscilla was still trying to destroy the awakened being Priscilla, trying to destroy the monster that she had allowed herself to become. So by not eating girls, she was hoping that maybe a claymore would come along to kill her. And that was just a weird part of the lore I noticed here as I was reading.
Well, it's very Netzach in a way, because Netzach is eternity as well. So if you're immortal, you're Netzach maxic. Excuse me, Netzach maxic.
Well, you're hoping
right,
that somebody can Netzach max.
But it's also weighted. It also weights her, right? It also, like that, not just her, but it weights you. It would weight you very much to material reality. And if your consciousness is like ascended and may possibly able to explore higher realms of thinking, you know, you could see where there's like a kind of humdrum nature of the world in a way. Like if you're already one of those beings, you could see like the Normieville is not going to be that appealing. So like what is the liberation for like low IQ people is like death. That's kind of one idea. So, but death is not the end, of course. And like my thinking.
But that is novel for a quote god. And I think a movie that comes to mind that really emphasizes that strongly is Zardoz.
That's a great film. Beautiful Kino.
Yeah.
Really Kino film.
But they all wanted to die. It's the really wild thing about the movie. Like the gods and goddesses, like they were welcoming that with open arms, because to them everything was so passe and cliche. Like death to them was a release in a sense. And also to borrow from the Dune thing, his real goal in the latter part of the book was to create humans that could kill him, essentially, was his goal. Because until that had happened, he hadn't really done his job properly. So you can almost kind of see Priscilla as that same necessary tyrant. And I kind of think the Earth in general we're probably due for that sort of thing. Like, because that's what God Leto says in the book, is his job was to be such a tyrant that teaches humanity a lesson they'll remember in their bones, to never again allow a tyrant. And so I think maybe that same thing applies here with the Priscilla example.
I totally agree. I think it's exactly that. I think there's an eternity, but it's not really an eternity. The thing is like even in the Hinduism, so just say normie Hinduism, gods do have a lifespan. It might be thousands of years from our perspective, and from their perspective, it might feel perceptual, feel like forever, but it's actually not. It is measurable in cosmic time, in yugas or kalpas, both. So whatever God's feeling, they're going to die anyway, basically. And also there's an idea of God that of the gods, I'm not talking about God, but the gods, they lowercase g, they definitely do not. They're more inclined to rajasic activity, sex, pleasures, not just sex, but like food, like all the kind of like whimsy fun, like they want to spend their time in like video games, not just video games, obviously chess comes from heaven, that's what they say, and all these things, like it's very much about the maya. It's very much about like oh, how do I feel? I want this, I want champagne and strawberries like every day, I want like caviar blini every day, I don't know, but yeah, basically that's what it is. And so they use up all their karma, and by using up all their karma, their good karma that let them be reborn in the God realm regardless, they actually turn tamasic. And that is, as we discussed pre-recording, that's also why the Asuras appear. So you could also say that that's kind of an allegory to that's kind of like the greater story or the meta story, the meta mythology of like maybe the series, or at least a comparative mythology that you could say speaks in these kinds of cyclical terms. That's talking about like the nature of samsara. Really, I know it's not quite Buddhist, but I'm going to use that frame, and so I think there is something there. Is like there is something very cyclical about it. It's like how the characters are created, how they're destroyed, how they come back, the stories that they play, and then Claire kind of sets a different history in motion. She doesn't emulate any that came before her.
Yeah, and it's a clearer, name suggests. It's a bright and clearer future, perhaps, too, for the organization in general, right? Because I know that the manga kind of continues far on the OVA. But anyway, that's all my notes. So I feel like I covered all the bases that I had.
Well, as always, I think you're amazing. I think that people should follow you on one of your. You've got some big accounts on IG, so I won't blow them up. But I'll just say like you can be found. You can definitely be found, and obviously on X, Twitter, you're integral, key, axial brother in our little band of misfit Kabbalists and magicians, and really appreciate you, and thank you so much, Joshua, for coming on. This is your third recording. We're gonna record with Seth next time on Dark Souls and
That's gonna
Elf.
be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
really fun. Elden Ring, and so
Soulsborne, I think, is what they call it. Like they've just kind of taken on games and pushed them together into a category called Soulsborne. I think it covers like Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and
awesome,
Elden Ring.
great. Well, I can't wait for that. But please let everyone know where you are. Don't forget to shout out our Friday night.
Yeah, so if you like what you're hearing, you can find me on Instagram at Appalachian, or excuse me, I changed it from Appalachian Aesthetic. I changed it to Apocalyptic Aesthetic. I like talking about end time a lot. And then you can find me on Twitter as W Birkin at Umbrella. So it's like W Birkin Umbrella, I think is the handle. You can find me on there. I talk a lot about news, politics, things like that, prophecy a little bit here and there. And I'm kind of getting back into those study videos. So I'm going to revive the branch content here soon as well. I just try to keep things compartmentalized so that they're not, schizo and everywhere. But thanks so much for, and I also did my little blurb shout out thing for symbolic studies last night, late night submission. So I made the deadline. So I'll have a Virgo shout out on there for his next upcoming episode. And I think I got a few more things in the pipeline. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Of course, you're always welcome. I consider you like a long-standing co-host on this show as well. And shout out Mario, who obviously has been on this show, True North, episode 40. And if you are in the crazy speculative Gnostic, speculative Kalachakra, speculative Tantra, speculative Gnosticism that we discussed on this episode, please check us out on the Grey Lodge. We now have a YouTube channel set up by Brother Matt. If you want to listen to like Meta Magicians, you can listen to us on the Grey Lodge. And if you want to listen to Threshold Saints, you can go check out Joshua's or the Branch's other 2 episodes. So thank you so much, and come back. I know you're coming back, but anytime, you're always welcome.
Namaste, man.
Namaste.